Monica had thoughtfully prepared everything. Wine glasses were full and laughter echoed around the dining table. Kent, as usual, cheerfully joined in the toast. He's not the most outgoing type, but at family gatherings, he tends to loosen up a bit, and it wasn't unusual for him to get a little tipsy. By the end of the evening, as people began to leave, Kent leaned gently against my shoulder and whispered that he felt a bit dizzy and might need help getting to the car. I didn't even... This had happened more than a few times before, but before I could help him up, another hand rested gently on my arm. "Let me help you, Aunt," Ethan said in a warm, calm voice, his sincere gaze making me pause for a split second. We helped Kent to the car together. On the ride home, Kent sat quietly in the back, while Ethan and I sat in the front. For the first time in years, I had a private moment with Ethan. No party noise, no family roles, just two people talking under the soft night sky of the city. Ethan talked about school, his future plans, and even the things he struggled with in life. I listened, occasionally smiling, as I realized the little boy I once knew had truly grown up. There was something in his voice, in his confidence and depth that made me feel moved. Not in a wrong way, but in a way I couldn't quite name. When we got home, Ethan and I helped Kent to the bedroom. He fell asleep almost immediately upon hitting the pillow. I knelt down to take off my husband's shoes, as I had lovingly done for years. Ethan stood quietly in the doorway, polite, respectful, not intruding on our private space. I turned and looked at Ethan. His eyes met mine, gentle, yet something flickered in them, just for a second. "Thank you so much, Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice as natural as possible. He gave a soft smile. "I'm always here for you, Aunt." I didn't know that this small moment, a glance, a seemingly harmless sentence, would open a door I never imagined I would step through. After Kent had settled into the bedroom, I returned to the living room. Ethan was still there, sitting quietly with a glass of water on the table, barely touched. The house had taken on an unusual stillness, as if the whole world were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself another glass of water. When I came back, Ethan was standing by the window, his gaze cast outside, though it was clear his mind wasn't really there. "Aunt Julia, could you sit with me for a bit?" he asked, his voice low but sincere. I nodded and sat down beside him. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just suspended. "I've always felt comfortable talking to you," Ethan began, turning the glass in his hands. "Since I was little, I believed that if there was ever something I couldn't tell Mom or Dad, I could come to you." I smiled, my heart softening. "You've always known that. I'm here to listen." He turned to me then, and his eyes held a maturity beyond what I was used to. "Lately, I feel like I'm changing a lot. Things I thought were clear are suddenly confusing." I tilted my head. "Confusing how?" Ethan paused for a moment. "Earrings that aren't like before. Not easy to name, even harder to say aloud, because they feel wrong, or at least I think they are." I felt a subtle tension rise in my back, a vague premonition brushing past. I took a deep breath and set my glass down. "Are you talking about someone?" He nodded. "About someone I think I shouldn't think about that way?" I stayed silent. I didn't know why, but I began to understand what he was about to say, and my heart started beating faster than usual. "Julia," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly, "I'm no longer sure if what I'm feeling is right or wrong, but whenever I'm near you, everything feels both complicated and safe." I flinched, just slightly. That wasn't something within the safe zone of a nephew confiding in his aunt. The air shifted, a subtle charge running through it, faint but unmistakable. "Ethan," I said softly, "you're going through a lot of young emotions. And sometimes close relationships can blur the lines." He looked at me, his eyes like trying to hold me in a moment that had never existed before. "You know, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I can't keep quiet forever." I stood up, feeling the need for some space to think. But as I turned away, I heard the chair move and sensed him approaching. Nothing crossed the line, just a gentle hand resting on mine. That was all, but time seemed to stop. I turned to look at Ethan, not the little boy I once knew, but a man looking at me with sincerity and inner conflict. I slowly withdrew my hand. Ethan, feelings are something we can't always control, but actions we can. Do you understand what I mean? He nodded, a flicker of disappointment passing over him, but he wasn't angry, just silent. You're a wonderful person, I continued, gently but firmly, and I believe many people out there will see that in you in the right way. Ethan smiled, slowly and with a weight behind it. Thank you. I just needed to say it, to feel lighter. I nodded, and as Ethan returned to the living room and I walked back into the bedroom, I knew clearly that something within me had changed from this night on. The bedroom felt so quiet, it was almost unfamiliar as I stepped inside. Kent was still sound asleep, his steady breathing drifting gently into my ears like a familiar melody, but tonight I couldn't fall into rhythm with it. I leaned against the door that had just closed behind me, my eyes drawn toward the dim space near the window, where the streetlight cast faint shadows across the floor, like blurred patches of light and dark. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I had grown used to everything being in order, everyone loving one another within the proper bounds, within reason. But the conversation with Ethan, his gaze, that honesty, was like a small stone tossed into a still lake. Not strong enough to stir a storm, but just enough for quiet ripples to spread, awakening things I had never dared to touch. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hand lightly gripping the blanket, as if seeking something to anchor me. Ethan is my nephew, by role and relation, the son of my brother-in-law, someone I once carried in my arms, took to the park on sunny summer days. And yet today I had hesitated when pulling my hand away from that gentle touch. I hadn't been angry, hadn't been upset, hadn't overreacted, as I probably should have. And that, more than anything, confused me. What is this feeling creeping into me? I closed my eyes, trying to brush away Ethan's sincere gaze, his quiet, empathetic voice, but the harder I tried to forget, the more clearly I remembered. Not because it was wrong, but because the loneliness I had buried for so long had suddenly been touched. I suddenly realized how long had it been since I had last felt seen in the truest sense of the word. Kent is a good man, a steady partner, but between us, everything had long fallen into a routine, like a melody with no surprises. We didn't argue, but we rarely reached the deeper layers of emotion anymore. Maybe it was the absence of children, maybe it was the calmness of our life, but we had begun walking beside each other without truly seeing one another. And then Ethan, with the naive but genuine honesty of youth, had seen me, not as Aunt Julia, but as a woman with emotions, a woman who could be sad, who might need someone to truly listen, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. I opened my eyes and looked up at the ceiling. No, I would not allow myself to take a single step beyond this quiet emotion. I would not let these unnamed feelings become action. But I also couldn't deny it. Tonight, something inside me had awakened. Tender, dangerous, and startlingly real. I laid down, pulled the blanket up to my chest, and closed my eyes, trying to lull myself to sleep. But the thoughts kept drifting like a river running backward, full of contradictions, full of self-questioning. And I knew when the sun rose the next morning, I would no longer be the Julia I had been the day before. I woke up as the morning light slipped through the sheer curtains, casting a pale golden streak across the beige blanket. Kent had gotten up early. He was always the one to wake before me on weekends, preparing coffee and reading the newspaper in the living room, a routine he had followed for many years. I sat up, took a deep breath, trying to shake off the mist still clinging to my forehead from last night's hazy dreams. Everything in this house remained the same. But I knew deep inside something in me was no longer as it used to be. As I stepped into the kitchen, I heard Ethan laughing softly with Ken. They were talking about movies, about the football team Ethan liked. Everything was normal. So normal that I fell out of sync. "Good morning, Aunt Julia." Ethan turned and greeted me, his smile as bright as always, but this time, his gaze lingered on me a little longer. It wasn't the kind of look shared between family members. It was the look of someone who had once stepped, however briefly, into a nameless territory and hadn't truly stepped back. I gave a slight nod and took the cup of coffee Kent had already poured. "Sleep well?" Kent asked, still flipping the pages of the paper. "Yeah, it was okay," I replied softly, but Ethan was looking at me. That gaze made me feel like I was living between two layers, the peaceful exterior and a quiet, shifting undercurrent stirring from within. At breakfast, I tried to keep the conversation focused on safe topics. Kent's work, the upcoming vacation, the dish Monica promised to bring to the next gathering. Ethan chimed in with his usual polite tone, but every time his eyes met mine, it was steady. Not rushed, not inappropriate, but just enough to throw my heartbeat off for a moment. After the meal, Kent left for work. Ethan stayed to help clean up. I told myself I needed to wash a few glasses to distract from the unease swirling inside, but when I reached for the dish towel, my hand accidentally brushed against Ethan's. It was just a gentle touch, but time seemed to pause in that absurdly small moment. I pulled my hand back quickly, blurting, "Careful, the glass is slippery." My voice trembled more than I expected. Ethan simply smiled. "I know." And in that moment, his eyes no longer belonged to a 22-year-old calling me Aunt Julia. They were the eyes of a man with a feeling no longer hidden. I stepped out into the backyard to get some air. The air was fresh, the lavender still blooming in the corner by the fence, but my mind was far from calm. I knew that if I didn't draw a clear boundary, things would go too far, even if nothing specific had happened yet. But that boundary now seemed more fragile than I had ever imagined. Just one look was enough to make me ask myself, why does the heart react to someone at the wrong time like this? I closed my eyes. I hadn't done anything wrong. I kept telling myself that over and over, but I couldn't claim I was completely innocent either. In the days that followed, I tried to maintain a proper distance from Ethan, not too cold, but careful not to let myself sink any deeper. I kept our conversations brief, sticking only to topics about the family. When Kent was around, I could breathe easier. But whenever it was just me and Ethan in the house, the atmosphere grew thick, dense with something unspoken, yet so present that neither of us could deny it. On Thursday evening, Kent was called away on a last-minute business trip, a short one, just 2 days. I walked him out to the car, holding him in a long hug. He turned and kissed me gently on the forehead, his eyes still as tender and trusting as they were in the early days. "Take care of yourself, okay? With Ethan at home, I know everything's in good hands," Kent smiled. I nodded, swallowing the words I wanted to say. Perhaps he shouldn't be so reassured. That night, I sat in the living room, wrapped in a light sweater, playing an old movie in search of a little peace. Ethan came in holding 2 cups of hot tea. He sat beside me, not too close to be misunderstood, but close enough for me to feel the warmth of the tea and of the person next to me. "I'm not trying to make things difficult, Aunt Julia," Ethan said, his voice low and sincere. "I know what I said before was a lot, but those feelings haven't gone away. I'm just trying to keep them respectful." I turned to look at him, but didn't respond. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Tired that I couldn't easily dismiss something that should have been simple. A clap of thunder sounded outside, and the rain began to fall. Drops tapped against the window glass, creating a soft, soothing rhythm. But it only reminded me that the world outside was still turning, while I remained trapped in a different kind of storm. An emotional one. Our eyes met, unintentionally. Neither of us spoke, but the air between us stretched tight, almost to the breaking point. I was about to turn away to shatter the moment with some light, meaningless comment when Ethan's hand gently settled on the back of mine. Warm, hesitant, and unmistakably grown. "I know where the line is," he whispered, "but sometimes emotions go beyond what we intend." I didn't pull my hand away. I just sat there in silence, in the rain, my heart pounding like a festival drum. I knew this moment would echo for a long time. I woke up earlier than usual. The air in the house still carried the scent of last night's rain, a damp chill slipping through every doorframe and corner, seeping quietly into my heart. The dim morning light slanted through the curtains, casting the room in a thin, mist-like haze. I sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped together, trying to gather the scattered pieces of thought left over from the night before. I hadn't slept. After that meaningful touch of his hand, I had quietly stood up, using sleep as an excuse. Ethan didn't stop me. He just gave a slight nod, his expression not disappointed, but as if he had already known. I had let things go further than they should have. And now my reason had come knocking, demanding to reclaim the place it was meant to hold. I stepped into the kitchen and began making coffee. The rich aroma drifted through the space, helping me breathe a little easier. When I turned around, Ethan was already there, leaning against the doorframe, wearing a simple gray t-shirt, his hair still tousled from sleep. He looked at me in silence, neither stepping in nor turning away. The pause stretched until I finally spoke. "Ethan, last night—" "Nothing happened last night," he interrupted, his voice calm but firm. I froze. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt an inexplicable sense of emptiness. "You don't have to explain. I understand," he added, pouring himself a glass of water. "I crossed the line by expressing those feelings. I'm sorry." "No, you don't need to apologize." I shook my head. "Feelings aren't wrong. It's just we have to put them in the right place." Ethan nodded slightly. I don't expect anything from you, honestly. I just needed to say it, to stay honest with myself." I looked at him, genuinely wanting to believe that everything could stop here, that the feelings would settle, like the rain did last night. But I also knew that once something is opened, it can never fully return to what it was. "You're a grown man now, Ethan," I said gently, "and I need to protect what I've built over all these years. Family, trust, and can't..." My husband's name rang out like a bell, a reminder of why I couldn't lose my way. Ethan smiled, a sad smile, but without resentment. "Understand, and I'll keep my distance if that's what you need." "Thank you," I nodded and poured another cup of coffee. In that moment, we were like two people standing at a crossroads, not moving forward, but not turning back either, just standing still, acknowledging the presence of something that had happened. Since that morning, everything between Ethan and me had become deliberately normal. He kept his promise: no more lingering gazes, no more subtle hints, no more accidental brushes of the hand like before. He treated me like a well-mannered nephew would, polite, thoughtful, proper, to the point of feeling almost distant. And that, rather than bringing me relief, left me feeling emptier than I expected. Kent, my husband, remained unaware of anything. He had always been a kind man, attentive in every gesture, loving me in a steady and safe way. But perhaps because of that, there were times I felt like I was living in a melody with no crescendos, no variations, just a gentle, repetitive tune that blurred into the background. One afternoon, while sitting alone in the backyard, Ethan came by, carrying a basket of fresh oranges he said he'd picked up at a nearby farm. I thanked him and was about to head back inside when he spoke. "Aunt Julia, are you doing okay these days?" I turned around. He looked at me, not expecting anything, just a genuine concern. I nodded and gave a faint smile. "I'm the same." Ethan sat down on the wooden chair beside me, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm the same too," he said. "But some things, no matter how hard we try to pretend they aren't there, they still remain." I didn't respond. I just watched the leaves fall onto the damp tiles. A breeze drifted through my hair, carrying a quiet ache I couldn't quite name. "When you say that," Ethan asked softly. When you've chosen silence, but your heart keeps speaking anyway? I swallowed hard. I looked at him. His eyes were bright, but not demanding, not manipulative, just honest. I think maybe it will all pass with time, I exhaled. You'll meet someone more suitable, younger, less complicated than me. He slowly shook his head. Not everyone needs things to be easy on, Julia. Some people only ask for something sincere, even if it's difficult. I turned away, my emotions tangled like a ball of yarn I couldn't unwind. These past days, I had tried hard to keep my distance, but now that he no longer stepped closer, it was I who felt the void. Ethan's silence was the emptiest thing I had ever tasted. Kent called me from inside, the sound of his voice coming from the kitchen, asking about the salad. I stood up quickly and said, I'll be right in. Ethan nodded, not stopping me. But as I walked past him, his hand brushed against mine, light as air, yet its echo lingered in me like a deep, reverberating call. I turned to look back, saying nothing. Our eyes held each other's for just one brief second. That moment was enough for me to understand these small touches, no matter how carefully avoided, were silent calls. And I wasn't sure I had the strength to ignore them forever. A week after that afternoon in the garden, I decided I would speak to Ethan one last time. Not to clarify anything, not to argue or explain, just to end it in the gentlest way possible. I asked him to meet me at the familiar cafe near the park, the one where we used to sit together with family years ago. Ethan arrived early as always. He sat in a quiet corner, sunlight streaming through the window, casting soft light across his delicate features, his eyes carrying a flicker of understanding, as if he already knew what I was about to say. I need to speak to you. This time, not as an aunt, but as a woman who's lived through half a lifetime, I began, my hands wrapped tightly around the still steaming cup of coffee. Ethan didn't reply. He tilted his head slightly, waiting. You made me feel alive again, I confess. I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly heard, truly seen. And for that, I'm grateful. His lips pressed together, trembling slightly. But because of that, I can't let this relationship move a step further. Even if no one knows, even if nothing has happened yet, we know. And that's enough. Ethan lowered his gaze. His voice was quiet, deeper. I knew you'd say that. I don't want to hurt Kent. But more than that, I don't want you to lose your youth for something impossible. I placed my hand on the table near his, but didn't touch. Keep that feeling. Let it become something beautiful. Just once. Ethan looked up, his eyes glimmering with an emotion that had yet to be named. Then he nodded gently. I never asked for anything. I only wanted to be honest once. And now I understand. We didn't cry. We didn't hold hands. We just sat there for a few quiet minutes, letting each of us keep a piece of a memory that would likely never return. When Ethan stood, he smiled. A smile more mature than his age. I'll be going abroad for my studies soon. Maybe it's for the best, for both of us. Yes, I nodded, though a hollow space had just opened inside me. I wish you happiness. I wish you happiness too, whether it's with someone or just with yourself. Ethan turned away, his back straight and unhurried. I stayed there alone for quite a while. The coffee had gone cold. Outside the window, autumn had begun to shift, the golden leaves falling softly with the breeze. That night, when Kent came home, he wrapped his arms around me from behind, as if he could sense something had quietly come to a close. I turned to look at him and smiled gently. No need to explain. Because sometimes growing up isn't about holding on to everything. It's about knowing when to let go and how to preserve the best parts in silence. Some relationships enter our lives like an unfamiliar breeze, gentle, yet enough to stir us deeply. Julia didn't choose that feeling, but she did choose how to face it and preserve the best part of it, sincerity. In the end, maturity isn't about holding on to every emotion, but about knowing where to place them so we can live fully with ourselves and those we love. What do you think about Julia's choice? If it were you, would you choose to let go honestly or hold on to a quiet feeling? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes even a small perspective can be a great source of comfort for someone else.